Hello classmates. This is Brendan Garino, and I am recording this Monday night. I have to apologize first because you will hear a lot of sounds in my background. I live in a very busy street, so forgiveness. So, today I am going to talk about providing feedback, confrontation, and silence in counseling or in therapy. So, welcome to my therapy room, or my counseling room. Attic. So, I'll start with the definition of feedback. So, what is feedback? So, according to Claiborne and Goodyear in their article titled Feedback in Psychotherapy, which was published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology in 2005, feedback in clinical practice is a deliberate psychological intervention that has two essential functions. So, it's for information and influence. Feedback can be descriptive, evaluative, emotional, and interpretive. So, as counselors or therapists, our main goal when providing feedback is how not to trigger the flight or fight response of our clients. So, in our reference book, one of the primary skills for a therapist or a counselor when giving feedback is knowing how to circumvent the error of language. So, when giving feedback, this can be done primarily by using validation. So, if you recall the important validation, validation does not mean that you're agreeing with the client's behavior or whatever they're saying. It's not cheerleading the client or it's not giving your approval to the client. So when we validate our clients, we do not judge them. Instead, we accept them unconditionally. So we use empathic listening to try to understand where they're coming from. And when our client believes that they have been heard, we strengthen that therapeutic alliance between the client and the therapist, and the client becomes more open to the process of counseling. So, another primary skill that the therapist needs to address is how we ourselves take in feedback. So, how do you react to feedback? I want you to recall moments when you were at the receiving end of feedback as a student, talking to your teacher, or as a professional, talking to your boss or your colleagues, or even in your family or within your circle of friends. How do you usually react when you're being given feedback? Does feedback make you feel nervous? Do you lash back? Or do you blank out? To practice our ability to receive feedback, Jug, Zhang, and Bean, in their article titled Giving and Receiving Effective Feedback, a review article and how to guide, tells us several things. So, the first thing that they recommend is that you listen. You listen because too often our first impulse is to interrupt uh, the person giving us feedback in a defensive attempt to negate the feedback that we might be receiving. So, allowing the giver to provide feedback is very important uh, because the defense responses that we show towards the person giving the feedback will likely diminish the amount and the quality of the information that we might get from the feedback. The second thing that they say is to express gratitude because giving feedback can actually be difficult and uncomfortable because there are so many barriers to giving feedback, such as uh, people being scared of the responses, not knowing how to give feedback, not knowing what kind of feedback to give. So these are really difficult to overcome. So when someone has surmounted those uh, difficulties in providing feedback to deliver that message to you, it only shows to you that they care about you and um, they want you to help you or to improve. And the last thing is that you need to clarify the feedback. And you can do this by practicing self reflection and uh, using an open communication with the person who gives you the feedback. The ability to reflect on the feedback internally, as well as um, being able to confirm your understanding of the feedback is very important in realizing the full benefit of feedback. So they also say that receiving feedback can be a difficult task, right? Depending on the message. So givers should modulate the quantity of the feedback that you want to deliver, because too many items of feedback may overwhelm the receiver. So sometimes you also need to prioritize feedback based on the importance of the message. So if it's not that important, it gets lesser priority. So it's also difficult to know how much feedback to deliver. And usually you can only determine this uh, within the context of the situation and may require the use of your emotional intelligence. So they also add that feedback should be descriptive, constructive, and non-judgmental. So the importance of word choice is very critical. It should be deliberate, uh, and they recommend using only nouns and verbs, and avoid using adverbs or adjectives. Because by using specific language and avoiding judgment, the tone of the message remains non-threatening and provides an opportunity for dialogue. And this establishes a positive interpersonal environment, which in turn fosters the change that we want to happen within our clients. So this is a video of how providing feedback and counseling happens.
Giving feedback is all about letting the client know you've observed and heard them without judgment. Then based on that, offering them objective and specific observations to help build their confidence. Plus, you can suggest ideas for continued growth. This can help the client understand themselves better. When giving feedback, it's useful to remember the acronym BOOST. Make your feedback balanced, observed, objective, specific, and timely. For example, the therapist could say, "I've noticed you've been late for our last 3 sessions. This means we're having shorter sessions and less time to work together. It's important that we start on time. What can we do to make this happen?" For more free tips and resources, check out the other videos in the Improve Your Counseling Skills.
Okay, so that concludes the part of providing feedback and counseling, my report. So let's move on to the next topic, which is confrontation. So in Conte's book, he said that Kellen Mueller in 1966 described effective counseling relationships are antithetical. They are not complementary. So what does antithetical mean? So antithetical means oppositional or opposing. So in this kind of relationship, confrontation is necessary. So why is it necessary? Because can you imagine if the therapist only agrees with the client, if the therapist only provides them with positive encouragement and affirmations all the time? Can't say, can't say that when therapists uh, use confrontation as a tool, uh, we should hold that metaphorical mirror to our clients' lives so that they can see the inconsistencies that they believe in. And when we do this, it makes them see or realize how to make sense of the chaos that surrounds their lives. So some people are better with confrontations than feedback, but it does not mean to say that therapists should yell at the client or disagree violently. The most effective confrontation is when the client does not realize that it is happening. So this is called gentle confrontation. Many counselors use the phrase, "I wonder if," to elicit perspective taking from the client. So gentle confrontation is best used when the client has a strong flight or fight response. These people have more difficult time accepting feedback and be very rigid sometimes, and sometimes they're very angry people. So confrontation can also mean developing the skill of cutting off. So there are 2 ways that this can be used. So first, you can cut off and stay with the client's current subject, or you can cut off and move away from the client's current topic. So maybe you can use a timeout so that you can cut them off, just like in the example from the book, and say that this is going to be your time to talk. The book also mentions that domineering clients can benefit from being confronted about their inconsiderate behavior towards others, including the therapist. But you have to do this in a very gentle way, because when you confront a client just for the sake of confronting, it's not beneficial, it's not helpful, and it's not therapeutic. The adage that right is not right all the time, because in counseling, sometimes or most of the time, it is more important to be heard by the client. So another strategy to show confrontation without eliciting the fight or flight response is by using the trick of dividing yourself in half. So you can say to the client, one part of me thinks that, and you agree with the client. And then you can also say, but another part of me thinks, and you can state your disagreement with the client while providing a different perspective. So here is a video of a counseling session by a nurse talking to a person who is having problems with this drinking behavior. Please watch.
Self-disclosure and immediacy are challenging skills and have been described in separate programs in this series. The skill of confronting is another high-level challenging skill worthy of focus. Of all the counseling skills, confronting is perhaps the most anxiety-provoking for nurses. It is difficult, but with practice can be an effective tool. Because of the negative associations with the term confrontation, it may be helpful for you to substitute the term challenging. What do we mean by the term confronting as it applies to counseling? Confronting is described as drawing the client's attention to discrepancies in his verbal or nonverbal behavior. It is also described as helping him to identify not only discrepancies, but also distortions which may keep him from making effective changes in his life. What is typically confronted is the client's attitudes, ideas, beliefs, or behaviors. Egan describes confronting as challenging the client to develop new perspectives on his problems or on his life, and challenging him to change his behavior, both internal and external, even when he is reluctant to do so. Confronting can also be effective when the client circles round and round in his conversation, when he's stuck, in other words. Bernard identifies a number of additional situations in which confronting can be helpful. For example, when the client uses negative statements about himself. I'll never be able to trust her again. Another example is when the client uses games in the relationship. For instance, responding with yes, but to every suggestion the nurse makes. A final example is when excuses are predominant in the client's responses. Bernard identifies 4 typical excuses. Complacency. For example, the attitude that it won't happen to me. Rationalization. For example, downplaying a behavior. Procrastination. For example, putting off acting on the problem in any way. And passing the buck. For example, ascribing the need to change to another person in the client's life. Now let's look at some scenarios to illustrate the principles of confronting. In the first scene, Alex, who has had problems with alcohol abuse, has been telling the nurse about how he has quit drinking on the advice of his doctor.
I know it's difficult, but do you get out very often with your friends?
Yeah, I get out, maybe once, twice a week, a couple of times a week, just go out, have a game of pool, and maybe have a beer or two. It's fun.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. Earlier you told me that you had stopped drinking 2 months ago, and now you just said that you were out drinking with your friends.
Yeah, no, it's not. I just have 1 or 2 beers. It's not like before. Before I'd go out, I might have 8, 9, 10. You know, who'd count? But I don't do that anymore.
I guess it's difficult where drinking was such a big part of your life.
Yeah, well, you know, these are my friends. I've hung out with them all my life. That's the type.
Here, the nurse points out a discrepancy between what Alex had told her earlier and what he is saying now. Note that the nurse begins by a response occurring within herself. I'm confused. Then she clearly and concisely states what her confusion is about. The confrontation, in other words. Note that confronting is not judgmental, but rather a factual statement of an observation the nurse is making. Note also that her tone is gentle. Alex responds somewhat defensively, and the nurse responds with an empathetic statement. He then begins to discuss his struggle with drinking. In scene
Okay, so to summarize, confrontational relationships are important because they fuel change. So uh, these changes can come in the form of changing the client's coping mechanisms or changing their behavior. And all of this is a product of the therapist's use of confrontation in the therapy setting. So the last uh, topic is going to be about silence in therapy or in counseling. So why are people so afraid of silences? Why do we always feel the need to fill in silences by turning on the radio right away or the TV when everything is perceived to be silent at home, or start talking immediately when you see somebody, or even avoid or be scared of places and events that require prolonged silences? So if you think about it, uh, your mind go quickly from one thought to another when events want us to be silent. So for example, in long prayers or in moments of silences. So the book says that therapists should be comfortable with silences because it serves different purposes. So it can provide clients time to think and process what is occurring. Just like in Dokigon's story about her client, in a study by Hill and others who did the survey about how therapists use silence in therapy, they noted that it is also used to encourage responsibility or to facilitate expression of feelings, not to interrupt session flow, and to convey empathy. So during silences, therapists observed the clients, thought about the therapy, and conveyed interest. So in general, therapists indicated that they would use silences with clients who are actively problem solving, and they don't recommend using silence with very disturbed clients. So here's a video of a therapist who uses uh, silence as a tool in her practice. So let's take a listen.
Melinda Haynes, license number 102308. So what do we do when we don't know what to do? So you're chilling with your client. You've got this client. Things are going along really well, and then all of a sudden there's this awkward dead silence. And you, as the new therapist, you're like, oh no, what happened? I'm losing them. They're not making progress. I need to say something. I need to do something. And it gets kind of panicky almost. And then you've got all this pressure to perform therapy. And that can feel anxiety provoking. So what we need to do in those moments, in those awkward moments of silence, is to acknowledge that, not out loud to the client necessarily, but just within you, is that this is about me. This awkward silence is about me, because a lot can happen in the silence. A lot can be happening with the client. Just the fact that they're sitting in a safe room and they're sitting with the person who's listening and attentive and who cares, that in itself can be powerful. The fact that you're not trying to force them to keep talking, to force them to keep processing, to keep doing something, making progress, that you're just allowing them to be where they are in the moment. That fact, all of that is sometimes just enough. However, if you feel like, it's been a long time now, maybe they're crying, maybe they're just very silent, and you feel like it's time therapeutically to move forward, you can say some things that might be beneficial. You can say something like, I noticed your body tensing up right there. Tell me about that. Or you can say something like, think out loud for me. What's going on? What's going on for you right now? Think out loud. Or you might even be able to say, I notice your tears. Tell me what those tears mean. Tell me what those tears are saying. And then whatever it is that you say, be silent again. Just let them answer now. Let them think about it. They might need a few minutes to actually think about what you've said, process what you've said, and then try to form the words to describe what it is that they're feeling. And they may not want to answer you at all, and you need to be okay with that. Okay, so just the fact that you're there, you're staying present, you're not running away from the silence, you're not trying to just fix the problem and make yourself feel better about yourself or about being a therapist. You're just allowing them to be wherever they are in the moment. And you're using those questions as a tool to kind of move forward if maybe they're stuck and they just don't know how to come out of their silence. Okay, so anyways, becoming a therapist, it's a fun and exciting experience. I appreciate you guys for choosing this profession. It's pretty awesome. So if you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so in summary, therapists should be very comfortable with silences with their practice because it can provide you with a lot of different insights and even results. So that's the end of my report. Thank you, classmates, for listening. See you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.